Imagine you're 21 years old, and in your spare time, you enjoy playing drums with your best friends in your heavy metal band and hanging out with your new girlfriend. But one day, she's not feeling well, and you leave to get her a bite to eat, hoping it'll make her feel better. This is Matt's story. He disappeared on that short trip, and I'm going to tell you what happened to him. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kimberlea. If you've never been here before, nice to finally meet you. There's something that has been getting to me lately, and it's the stories of random killings. Things that don't add up or make sense, and tragedies that just should not have happened. And this is another one of those stories. A story that is just senseless and unbelievable, and it proves that this can happen to anyone. I've been watching Stephanie Harlow lately, a recommendation from all of you, and she has these long videos that I like, very well researched, and she made a good observation. There's something called grief fatigue. I think creators and viewers experience it a lot with true crime. When you hear about these heartbreaking cases back to back again and again and again, you can carry that pain with you and not really get a break from it. It's part of our jobs as creators, and luckily I have a very good support system and therapy to help me. But stories like this one and the one from last week with Melanie Goodwin, along with so many others that can seemingly happen at random, can really affect us. But before I get into the case for today, I would like to thank our sponsor for making this video possible. The holidays are here, and it's during this time of year we tend to focus our time and energy on others, but neglect our own self-care. And I know I am guilty of this for sure. I don't do yoga or meditate. For me, it's listening to stories. That is what relieves my stress. And if you're here watching my video, I'm sure that you can relate. Stories have always been an escape for me. They transport my mind to a world where I can relax and treat myself to anything that my mind has the power to create. And our loyal sponsor for today is once again Dipsea, which is one of my favorites, and it's an app full of hundreds of short, sexy audio stories designed by women for women, and I really like that. You can listen to the most soothing voices, take you away to another time and place, but there's more. Research shows that sex is as mental as it is physical, and I am all about the science behind feeling my very best. Dipsea can help bring out a whole new world of fantasies in a brand new way.
Don't even get me started.
Well, how about a massage instead?
You don't have to do that.
No. I don't want to hear it. Turn around.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to start with these shoulders.
Yes, please.
Good? More pressure?
No, that's perfect.
Oh, damn, Des. You're a ball of knots.
I know. Hey, maybe we should quit our jobs and move to a farm in Ireland or something.
So what did you think? I think it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of different characters, couples, situations, and stories on Dipsea. There's something for everyone. Dipsea is radically inclusive. They say that their stories are for straight and queer listeners, and that over half of their stories are voiced by people of color. And to me, that means that we can all find something relatable, either a story or the characters in them, and I like that a lot. I also like to explore things that I'm not familiar with. They also have soothing sleep stories, wellness sessions, and sexy stories that you can read instead of listen to. There's new content released every week, so in between listening to your favorite stories again and again, you can always find something new to explore. Let Dipsea be your go-to place to spice up your me time, explore your fantasies, relax and unwind, or heat things up with a partner. Dipsea is offering all of you an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipseastories.com/Kimberlea. That's 30 days of full access for free when you go to DIPSEA stories.com/Kimberlea. Thank you once again to Dipsea for sponsoring me and my channel and making today's video possible. Now let's get into the story for today. Today's case is about a talented, kind-hearted, beautiful soul named Matthew Landry. Matthew Robert Landry was born October 26, 1987 to Doreen and Robert Bob Landry. Matt was the youngest of 5 children. He had 2 older sisters, Christina and Gina, and 2 older brothers, Christopher and Douglas. Matt Landry loved skateboarding. He was a jokester. He liked to play all kinds of pranks on his friends and make people laugh. He was the typical boy next door with a little flair, His friends knew there would never be a dull moment hanging out with Matt because he would constantly keep you on your toes. His core group of friends were a group of guys that he started a band with and had been playing with for many years. He considered his bandmates his best friends, and by the time Matt was 21 years old, he loved two things in life more than anything: his new girlfriend, Francesca Bomarito, and music, specifically playing the drums. Matt and his best friends had a heavy metal band, and they would frequently get together to jam out in one of the band members' basements. So they basically had a basement band. And they were the happiest when they were playing music, especially Matt. I have seen a few videos of Matt playing drums, and I can tell you right now, this guy has some serious talent. And although their band wasn't famous, and they only played one paying gig by 2009, they had big plans and even bigger dreams, especially for guys living in Chesterfield Township in Michigan. If you've been here before, you just heard me say township, and you're probably thinking another township. And yes, that's right. Today's case is taking us to yet another township, and it's in Michigan, just like the Egypt Covington case. If you haven't seen that one, I will link it in the end screen at the end of this video and in the cards above. But back to Matt's story. He lived with his parents in Chesterfield Township in Michigan. Chesterfield Township is a charter township of Macomb County, and the population was about 34,000 back in 2009. It's north of Detroit, off of Anchor Bay, which is part of Lake St. Clair. Like many other townships that we've talked about, it consists of an area that has typical stores and restaurants, etc. But then it's surrounded by somewhat of a less built-up area, and you can see it right here on the map. The middle section consists of all the businesses, and then just outside this line, there's more land than buildings. This is the area that Matt lived in with his parents, and for what I could gather, I believe that this may have been the home they lived in. It was a quaint, little quiet neighborhood with houses pretty close together and close-knit. So let's jump to the summer of 2009. Matt was 21, and he had just recently started dating Francesca. She also loved music and played the bass guitar, and they had similar loves for movies and music and would spend hours watching movies at friends' house. And although Matt had no trouble shining when he had drumsticks in his hands, he was a shy, quiet type of guy, more reserved than outgoing, a sweet, shy guy. Even when it came to getting into a relationship with Francesca, it started as a friendship, and it was Francesca that really made the moves to make it more. She would invite Matt to come over and hang out, and he'd say yes, and she would ask him again and again, and finally he decided to stay over one night, and the rest is history. Everyone that knew Matt knew how much he cared about Francesca. His parents, Doreen and Bob, knew their son so well. They were very close to Matt, and they were in contact with him daily, especially his mom. He was a regular texter and caller, always keeping in touch with those he cared about, especially his best friends in his band, his mom, Doreen, and now Francesca, his new girlfriend. Doreen knew this relationship was for real because Matt would just light up anytime he would mention Francesca's name. She lived about 20 minutes away from Matt in a town called Roseville. Both of them worked part-time jobs where their shifts varied. They could be on the clock until very late at night, with Francesca working at a restaurant and Matt at a pizza place called Dolly's Pizza, delivering pizzas about 8 minutes away from his house. Anytime they would not be working, they would try to spend time together, even if it meant waiting up for the other one's shift to end and having to start their hangout sessions late into the night or even the early morning after midnight. It didn't matter because they were in love and they wanted to be together whenever they could. On the afternoon of Saturday, August 9th, 2009, Matt had a session with his bandmates, and then he had to work a shift at Dolly's. By the evening, still working, Matt called his mom worried he wouldn't be able to finish his shift because something was wrong with his green 2000 four-door Honda Accord. He told her that his car alarm kept randomly going off, which was very distracting while driving and to those on the road. So he asked her if he could swing by the house and grab her car so he could finish up his deliveries. And of course, she said yes. So he made his way over there, parked his car in the driveway, and took his mother's car back to Dolly's, using it for his deliveries until his shift ended later that night. It was close to midnight, and he was still waiting for Francesca to end her shift at the restaurant. So he went home to kill some time before they met up. It was around 2:30 in the morning, and while Doreen's husband Bob slept through a storm that was raging outside, Doreen was kept up awake by the thunder and the bright lightning outside, so she chose to open a book and read in the living room, leaving her husband Bob upstairs in bed, sleeping. Matt was getting ready to leave for Francesca's house. He told his mom he was going to try to see what was wrong with his car before he left. So he went outside while Doreen watched him from the living room window. She watched Matt walk around his car in the driveway, trying to figure out what to do. He knew the car alarm kept sounding off without warning, but they didn't know why. So his mom was actually hoping that the alarm would not start blaring right now because it was 2:55 a.m. She didn't want anyone in their quiet little neighborhood to be woken up by the alarm. But nevertheless, Doreen couldn't do much except for watch her son as he tried to gently lift up the car hood just enough, but then he set the alarm off, just as she expected he would, and he panicked. So he hopped into his car and he sped off down the street so that he could move his car out of the neighborhood and not wake anyone up. It was about time for Matt's girlfriend Francesca to finish her shift at the restaurant where she worked, so he just drove right to her place. Matt arrived at Francesca's with a bottle of wine in hand, and they stayed up late having a really fun night together. But by the next morning, Francesca was not feeling well, which was a little disappointing because Matt had planned to take her to a backyard family barbecue later that afternoon back at his parents' house. And he really wanted her to meet his sister Gina's boyfriend. However, Matt was more concerned with caring for Francesca and nursing her back to health than the barbecue. Besides, he knew that Francesca was not going anywhere and would have plenty of other opportunities to meet his family. Her well-being came first. That was Matt's nature, to be the caregiver, which he probably got from his own mother, being so kind and loving as she was. So he made Francesca a hot bath, got her a cup of tea, and brought her a thermometer to take her temperature. He was just doing whatever he could as a caring boyfriend. After a little while, Francesca still wasn't feeling that great. She was running a fever, so Matt called his mom to let her know what was going on, and he even asked her, "What do you think I could do? Is there anything else I can do for Francesca?" And his mom thought that Matt was doing everything he possibly could, and she just hoped that Francesca would feel better. Matt told his mom that Francesca was going to take a little nap, and when she woke up, they would both come over. Doreen was looking forward to it. She said what she does to all of her kids before ending each and every phone call with them. She said, "I love you, Matt." And he said, "I love you too, Mom." Matt had to do some errands, so he figured he would get them done while Fran slept. But before leaving, he asked her if she wanted anything, if she wanted any food, if she was hungry, and initially she accepted the offer. But then she soon realized her stomach was not ready for food, so she declined. She decided to take that nap, and Matt left to go get some stuff done. He told her that he would come back when he was finished, then wake her up, and they would go over to his place for that family barbecue that evening. Francesca woke up expecting to find Matt at her side, but as she looked around, he wasn't there. She looked at the time and realized it was much later than she expected. It was 5:47 p.m. She thought Matt would wake her up before 5 so that they could make it to his parents' barbecue. So she's confused, and she calls Matt's phone, and she gets no answer. She texted, and still nothing. She was just sitting there staring at her phone, waiting for something to happen. She figured maybe he was still out running errands, so she waited for him to call or show up, but while doing so, she fell back to sleep. Meanwhile, back at Matt's parents' house, the barbecue had already begun, and Doreen had noticed that her son and his girlfriend hadn't made it, but she just figured Francesca ended up too under the weather to attend and didn't think much else of it. Who would? You don't expect anything out of the ordinary to be wrong just because your 21-year-old and his girlfriend doesn't show up to a barbecue after telling you they may not make it. But where was Matt? That's the question his family and his loved ones would soon be asking each other. Francesca woke up yet again and started to worry because Matt continued to ignore her calls and not get back to her, which was highly unlike him. He was in constant contact with her and others, and he would always answer. If he didn't, he would call right back within just a few minutes, not hours. And it was 7:31 p.m. when she called him again with no answer, no text back, nothing. All kinds of thoughts were going through her mind because you aren't going right into thinking anything bad is happening. the initial thought can go to it's that person's choice not to answer. They're too busy, mad at you, or even in the case of a couple, maybe they're with someone else. So it's frustrating. You care about this person. You want to know what's going on. So by 9:01, Matt was still not answering Francesca's calls. So she started to think of something more sinister as an explanation. Now she was feeling very worried about Matt's well-being. As I said, you go through those stages. You're frustrated, you're angry, and then you start getting worried, and then you almost get sick to your stomach with worry, just wondering what in the world is going on, and you freak out. She started thinking maybe he got into a car accident or his car got stuck in a ditch. After all, his car was giving him issues the past few days. Francesca's mind could not stop thinking of all the worst case scenarios. She did not know what else to do, so she started to contact local hospitals and police departments to see if anyone matching Matt's description was there. But they didn't have anyone matching the information about Matt reported as being injured or in trouble. It wasn't only Francesca who was concerned about Matt. On Sunday evening, Matt's childhood friend Chris Emmerich, who was also in his band, was concerned. He was in constant contact with his friends. Matt suddenly turned radio silent. He was the type of person that would text his friends all day long, hourly. So Chris was concerned, and he actually got in his car and started to drive the route he knew Matt would typically take, thinking that he would find Matt's car stranded or wrecked on the side of the road. After trying to find Matt but having no luck, Chris contacts his mother, Doreen, around 9 p.m. to tell her he thought something was very wrong because he couldn't get a hold of Matt. His mom thought he was with his girlfriend, Francesca. And it's so important to have friends like this, friends who know your routine, your character, your family, so they can quickly piece things together when something doesn't feel right. Doreen was immediately concerned when she figured out that Francesca hadn't heard from him either. And in moments like these, I see a pattern. As humans, we want to do what we can with what we know. We want to use our expertise to help in some way, whether it's just to alleviate our fears or to dispel those bad thoughts. We take action. And in the case I just did about Melanie Goodwin, her mother was a computer programmer. She went to work right away searching records online. And in this case, Matt's mother was a banker. So she got to work pulling up Matt's bank records to look at where he may have used his debit card last. And I am seeing this more and more, especially with more recent cases. We're taking action as regular citizens, and we are becoming the sleuths, and we are making a difference. Doreen was able to see Matt's debit card activity, but it did not alleviate her fears. She had been in the banking industry a long time, and she was very well versed in spotting fraudulent charges. Right away, red flags started going up for her. There were 3 suspicious transactions made, all 3 from the same location, back to back, all 3 $100 withdrawals from an ATM, and it wasn't one close by. That was another red flag for her. These transactions were made from a gas station on 7 Mile Road in Detroit, Michigan. Detroit streets use a mile road system. One of the most famous is 8 Mile Road, where Marshall Mathers, aka Eminem, was born. Rapper and videographer Darnell Williams said that 8 Mile is hugely popular because of the movie, but it is the last point before the suburbs. According to Darnell Williams, 7 Mile Road is the actual city of Detroit. And the 7 Mile Road area at this point was overrun with gangs, drugs, and violence. Police officers in this area didn't even conduct night patrols anymore because it was so dangerous. Instead, bounty hunters were hired to deal with the criminals. Doreen's stomach twisted into knots. What was her son, who had just been nursing his sick girlfriend back to health, doing near 7 Mile Road in Detroit? It was at least a 30-minute drive out of the way from anywhere that she knew he would normally go. She was at a loss, trying to figure out why he would be in such a scary part of town with burned out houses littering the area, which was basically a death trap. Doreen also knew how careful Matt was with his money. Matt would avoid ATMs with processing fees if he could. He would have gone to his local bank. He would not have made 3 withdrawals back to back, costing him an extra $6. She also checked her son's phone records and saw that the last time he actually used his phone was at 4:15 p.m. on Sunday. After that, it was shut off and never back on. That was very concerning. By the next morning, Monday, August 11th, Doreen and Bob decided they need to go down to the local Chesterfield Township Police Department and report Matt missing. By this time, most of Matt's close friends, including his girlfriend Francesca, had spoken to Matt's parents. So Doreen was able to give the police all the information they had between the last calls Matt made from his phone, according to his phone records, to the calls made to him by his friends and Francesca, and the last place he was, which was at her place. She also gave them information about the bank transactions all the way out in Detroit. Now, what happens next, I can't help but be upset about. But I understand that there are a lot of procedures and processes in place when police are contacted about somebody being missing, especially when it's an adult. And in this case, Matt was 21 years old, and they're only working with the information that they have. But it seems like in a lot of cases, the cops are very judgmental. That's their first response, is that we've heard this time and time before. He's an adult. He's a grown man. That's another one. He's a grown man. Like it matters if you're a man or a woman, that it should be taken less seriously if you're a man. As though a man can take care of himself and leave him alone type of thing. They tell Doreen and Bob that Matt is a grown man who can make his own choices. And he was free to leave town. Even though he lived with his parents, he didn't have to let them know where he was going. They also tell Matt's parents they need to wait, that it was very common for a 21-year-old to get drunk or high all night and then pass out at a friend's house and not call until the next day. Now, mind you, he actually hadn't been seen since Sunday evening. And as far as anyone close to him were concerned, he wasn't out partying. He was taking care of his girlfriend and running some errands, and even planned to go to a family barbecue. So his parents were sitting there thinking, no, you don't know our son. And we hear that a lot. They were like, you don't know our son? You don't know what's going on here. And in this case, Doreen and Bob actually spoke up and said, that's not our son. That's not what he would be doing. It's out of character. Especially not speaking to anyone for the rest of the entire day and not getting in contact with them by Monday, and his phone was off. So the police finally give in, and they tell Matt's parents, we'll go ahead and put Matt in our system. But another reason the Chesterfield Township Police weren't really taking it seriously was because it was out of their jurisdiction, so to speak. Matt lived in Chesterfield Township, but he was last seen in Roseville at Francesca's house. So his parents were told that they should be calling Roseville Police Department, and they had to wait 24 hours to make an official report. So that's what they did. They waited. Meanwhile, something else completely out of the ordinary was happening in another township so close to Chesterfield. The Roseville PD got a call that a man had just tried to rob a bank in Harrison Township. It's 16 minutes south of Chesterfield and between Chesterfield and Roseville. And it got worse. Police were notified that a young woman, only 19 years old, almost lost her life, and she was held at gunpoint. So they rushed over to find out what in the world is going on. This was highly unusual for this area. And when the officers arrive, they find 19-year-old Sarah Maynard shaken beyond belief, along with bank staff and customers. And they're telling their terrifying stories about what just happened. Sarah Maynard was on her way to cash her very first paycheck. She had just started a new job at a dog kennel. She gets out of her car to enter the Flagstar Bank branch, and she felt like someone was watching her. We've all felt that strange feeling. And she turns around, and she noticed a man with sunglasses that was lurking behind her. And while Sarah did feel creeped out, this wasn't that uncommon, so she shrugged it off, and she just told herself she was being overdramatic. While she ignored this man, she walks into the bank, hands her check to the teller, and just as she did so, Sarah felt the cold metal muzzle of a gun being pushed into the back of her head with force. CCTV footage from inside this bank captured the entire event, and it is chilling to watch. As he held the gun to Sarah, with his other hand on her throat, the man told the teller to give him $50,000 or he would kill her. This is completely terrifying. An ordinary trip to the bank and your life hangs in the balance. The teller explained to the man she did not have that much cash, but the robber continued to threaten Sarah's life. So the teller, eventually being desperate, opened the drawer and gave him everything that she had. After this, the man let go of Sarah, and she turned around, and she saw that the man who was threatening her was the same one who had been staring at her as she entered the bank. She was now face to face with this dangerous man. He wasn't done either. He walked around the bank collecting wallets and cash from all of the terrified customers, and he continued to threaten their lives, waving and pointing his gun at them. Can you even imagine the fear? It's unbelievable, and it's not over yet. What happens next is even more horrifying. He goes right back over to Sarah with his gun in hand, and he threatened her again, and he told her to come with him or he would kill her. This next part is so important. Please listen to this. Listen to what Sarah did. Sarah bravely refused. She sat down on the ground and told him no. She wouldn't move. She used all of her force to stay right there glued to that bank floor no matter what. With time going by, the frustrated bank robber tried to pull her up repeatedly and repeated his demands over and over, but eventually he gave up and he fled. When the Harrison Township investigators examined the footage and saw what this suspect was capable of, they were stunned. This man was brazen. He was bold. He wasn't afraid. And when burglars walk into banks, they usually try to draw as little attention to themselves as possible. They'll just leave a note with the teller, but the Flagstar bank robber didn't seem to care. And the investigators believed that this robber would have done anything necessary to get what he wanted. They're surprised that he left Sarah behind and that he hardly even disguised himself. The investigators said that what Sarah did saved her life. That was a very important lesson for me to take away here. Sarah was interviewed later, and she said that either way, something bad could have happened, but she didn't want to find out what if she went with him. At least if he decided to hurt her at the bank, the videos and the eyewitnesses would know what he did. She made the right choice. It won't always end positively like it did for Sarah, but it was an important takeaway. So you might be wondering what Sarah has to do with Matt and his case. Well, for one thing, these township police departments and Roseville Police Department are now dealing with two unusual reports. Matt being missing and the suspicious ATM transactions, and now this bank robbery so close in proximity. So it does correlate to them. In that, coupled together in such a short time frame and proximity location-wise, they needed to keep both of these incidents in mind as they went forward. And it's a very good thing they did, because I'm going to tell you what happens next and how this all connects. Now, at that 24-hour mark, the Landrys, along with Francesca, decide it's time to make that official missing persons report because they had to wait that designated time frame, and we've all heard this. So we're on Monday evening on the 11th. They still kind of gave them the same song and dance at Roseville Police Department that Chesterfield did, but thankfully, there was one detective, Scott Blackwell. He was overhearing everything that was going on, and when they were done speaking with an officer, Detective Blackwell wanted to talk to Doreen. She was the one who went out of her way to get all the records, Matt's debit card transactions at the gas station on 7 Mile Road in Detroit, and she told him that Matt used his debit card at Quiznos Subs in East Point at 2:33 p.m. That was the very last transaction before all of the strange withdrawals. The Quiznos made sense to Doreen because it's somewhere that he would eat frequently, and it was close by. But the other transactions made an hour later all the way in Detroit was not normal. I mean, all of Matt's money had been withdrawn from his account. And even though his parents were hoping it was him that made these transactions, it really just did not make sense. So Detective Blackwell saw the red flags go up, and he was interested in this case. And he told them that he would do whatever he could to try to figure out what was going on. Detective Blackwell flagged Matt's green Honda as a wanted vehicle on the Law Enforcement Information Network. Then he went to the Sunoco gas station because he wanted to find out if they had video surveillance cameras that would help him right away. Because if Matt was on video, it would ease his parents' minds. Maybe he did leave town. But if it was someone else on those videos, then they needed to look into this further. Detective Blackwell got to the gas station and began talking with the owner, Moses Rahim. Detective Blackwell requested to view the CCTV footage from the security system shortly before 3:30 p.m. on Sunday, August 9th. That's when Matt's debit card transactions occurred. It was actually pure luck that Moses Rahim was able to help. If they had needed footage of that ATM area just 3 days before this happened, there wouldn't be any. He told Detective Blackwell he was lucky because only 3 days ago, Moses had gone to Sam's Club specifically to buy a high-end security camera to capture a blind spot that his old camera didn't catch right where the ATM was. For some reason, Moses was not only compelled to buy a new system to include that spot, but he also felt the urge to set it up immediately. It was the weekend when he purchased it, and Moses' son, Issa, tried to convince him that they did not need to install the camera. He suggested, let's do it on Monday. However, Moses was adamant that they replace the system that day, and thankfully they did, because what they captured on video took Matt's case in a totally different direction. Although Detective Blackwell felt lucky to have found this footage, watching it gave him a really bad feeling. At 3:30 p.m., about an hour after Matt's card had been used at the Quiznos subs, Moses Rahim's state-of-the-art Sam's Club security camera captured someone other than Matt using Matt's debit card at the gas station. And while Detective Blackwell dreaded having to tell Doreen and Bob Landry what he had just seen, he didn't hesitate to call them and let them know it was not their son on that video. The Landrys were really hoping that there would be a reasonable explanation for why Matt wasn't in contact with them. They were even hoping that the police were right, that maybe he was high or drunk and passed out somewhere. But Detective Blackwell had evidence that pointed to something way more sinister. And I'm going to get back to that and everything else that was on that video because Blackwell had to wait to get a copy of it. But by the next day, on Tuesday, August 12th, the family was passing out flyers with Matt's photo and all of his information on it. They even checked auto repair stores, thinking that maybe his car had broken down as he attempted to buy items to fix it. Francesca had resorted to checking dumpsters. And it's sad, but she was so desperate to find out what happened to the man she loved. She was driving from Roseville south into Detroit and checking along every major road and any store or restaurants that had dumpsters behind them. And as Francesca dug through trash, she could not believe that this is what her life had become. Francesca and Matt were watching movies and making plans for their future just a few days before this, and now he was missing. And she was searching through the garbage for his dead body, which was unreal. And what happens next was also some kind of luck, or maybe the fact that both the police and Matt's loved ones were both retracing his assumed steps. But Francesca sees a lot of police activity right when she was about to make it into Detroit and closer to 7 Mile Road. She sees cop cars just whizzing past her with their sirens blaring, and she decided to follow them. It was in this approximate area that I'm showing you on the map, Rossini Drive, and obviously the police had found something big. Francesca hoped it wasn't Matt's body. And as she got closer, she didn't see Matt, but she did see something familiar. It was Matt's green Honda Accord. It was abandoned on the side of the road on Rossini Drive in Hayes Street. It was around 4 miles away from 7 Mile Road and only 2 minutes from the Sunoco gas station where those ATM transactions were made. Francesca knew it was Matt's car right away, so she got out of her car and she made her way over to the police officers, and she was so determined and so brave. She was able to explain everything, who she was, and even able to put one of the officers on the phone with Matt's mom, and that's huge. And I'm going to tell you right now, Matt's loved ones were pivotal in solving this case. Some may argue they did more than the police. So far, Matt's mom was the one pulling the bank statements and locating the gas station where suspicious transactions took place, and Francesca has her boots on the ground from Roseville into Detroit looking for her boyfriend and is now able to connect this officer to Matt's mom, Doreen. And he provides a clue. He tells her there are maps inside Matt's car in the passenger seat. And at first, this wasn't something that seemed out of place. Matt was a pizza delivery driver. Doreen said it would not have been uncommon for him to use maps to make sure he found the correct locations, but then I thought back to 2009. I'm pretty sure we had maps on our iPhones. However, when I Googled it, it turns out iPhones didn't have Apple Maps until 2012. However, they did have Google Maps, but I don't recall the accuracy of them. Could there be another reason for these maps to be in Matt's car? Matt delivered pizza locally, so unless he was trying to make his way well out of town, maybe it would be odd for him to have maps. Police towed the car to a garage at the Chesterfield Township Police Department for processing. By that night, Matt's face and story were all over the local news stations, along with Sarah Menard's harrowing brush with death at that Flagstar Bank. And watching the news that night was one of the investigators from the Roseville Police Department, Lieutenant Raymond Blarick. Now, this news report of the bank robber showcased that horrific footage from the CCTV camera, including the robber with the sunglasses on and poor Sarah in his grasp. This case had nothing to do with the Roseville PD for now anyway, since it happened in Harrison Township. But it was shocking to him as a mere citizen of the area, and he was glued to the screen taking in every detail. And good thing he was, because by the next day, he would be using that news segment to somehow connect the dots to form conclusions in Matt's case. Someone else from Matt's inner circle had become aware of the evidence in this case. It was Matt's dad's best friend, Christopher Manning. Hearing that his best friend's 21-year-old son had vanished, he was not just going to sit around and do nothing. Someone had to stay at the Landry's in case Matt called or came home, so Christopher took it upon himself to play detective. By 7 p.m., Chris and his brother were driving out to the location where Matt's car was found, and these men were so brave. This area was residential in nature. Here it is on the Google Maps. I'm going to give you an idea of where this took place. Keep in mind, this is only 2 minutes away from 7 Mile Road. This is what the area looked like for the most part. And if you keep making your way down Hayes, you will run into 7 Mile Road and the Sunoco gas station right here. Chris and his brother searched that area for about 90 minutes before they made their way up to that Sunoco gas station. Remember, the family has not seen the video because Detective Blackwell had to wait to get an official copy that he could retain as evidence, and then he planned to show them. Well, Christopher Manning was determined to see what was on that tape, and somehow they were able to convince Moses Rahim to show them the video, and he did. Here's what they saw. A guy in a white shirt with an orange baseball cap using the ATM. At one point, he turns and faces the camera, and that's when something unexpected happened. One of the cashiers that was working that night was watching the news, and he had just seen that bank robbery segment. And then he caught a glimpse of the guy on the ATM video. If Chris and his brother hadn't even come in there that night to watch it, at that very moment, the cashier may not have seen this video. Well, he made the connection between the guy in the bank video and the one on the ATM footage. He's like, that is the same guy. And sure enough, Chris and his brother agreed. And not only that, this cashier gave them a name. He said this was a local guy who came in all the time, and he went by the name IHOP. He thought he might even be a gang member. And he told them that's pretty much all he knew. But that was a lot. It seemed like they're moving faster than the police at this point. And on that same footage, they watched this guy purchase a white t-shirt, then take off his shirt that he's wearing and put the new shirt on, walk out of the gas station, and throw the shirt away in the dumpster on site. The cashier said this is the first time he had ever seen IHOP use an ATM, and he always paid in cash, never with a card. So Chris immediately walks out, he goes to that trash, and he's astonished to find that the shirt was still inside. So he collects it, and him and his brother go off to canvass the surrounding area, hoping to find Matt or more clues to his disappearance. Why stop now, right? They were on a roll, but it's dark. And these brothers don't let that scare them, though. They go up and down 7 Mile Road into abandoned and burned out houses, trying to see what they could find, armed with only a flashlight and their sheer determination. They were even stopped by some of the locals asking them, "What are you doing here?" And they confidently told them that they were working on a case involving the disappearance of a young man, and the person left them alone, thinking that they were actual police officers. That's the air that they had about them, and maybe they were pretending that they were officers. I'm not sure, but all I know is nobody bothered them after that. They kept at it until around 10:30 p.m., and then they made their way back to Roseville Police Department to hand over the t-shirt that they found. The next day, back at the same department, Lieutenant Raymond Blarick is starting his day. Now, he's the one I told you about that was watching the news with the bank robbery, and he was just a concerned citizen at the time. He didn't know that the next day he would be thrown into that very case because a call came in from a man who had just been carjacked at a Walmart parking lot on 12 Mile Road. Lieutenant Blarick was one of the people called out to the scene. The responding officers did not see the suspect when they arrived in that Walmart parking lot, but the victim and his car, a red Honda Civic, were still there. The victim said, a man came up to him as he was getting into his car after shopping. The guy took out a gun and told him to get out of the car and run. So he did what he was told. But to his surprise, he looks back and the gunman is not pulling away. He didn't know why, but he realized it was because the guy did not know how to drive manual transmission. I had to laugh at this because I learned at 14 years old. My very first car was a stick shift, and every other car after that, except for my very last one, and now I'm carless. But I always loved driving manual instead of automatic. But there is a learning curve, and this guy never learned. And he certainly didn't have time during a carjacking in broad daylight, so he fled on foot. But by that time, the owner of the Civic had already started calling 911. Well, guess what? One of the officers saw someone who looked nervous running through that parking lot, and as the person was running, a wig flew off of their head. Well, that was definitely something that piqued their interest, so they chased after him. And as they got closer, the man threw a gun and a clip from out of his pocket. So police didn't even hesitate. At this point, they tased the guy. Now he's under arrest, and Blarick gets a good look at him. And he realizes this is the same man that he saw on that CCTV footage from the bank robbery. His name is Ehab Maslamani. He goes by the street name IHOP. Blarick begins putting clues together. One being the green Honda that was found not too far from the Walmart the day before. Both being Hondas and involved in some type of crime, he wants to find out more. So he calls over to the Chesterfield Township Police Department and he's informed about the maps inside. Well, upon further inspection, a direct link is found. A literal X marks the spot. I'm not kidding. The map had an X on it where the Flagstar Bank is located. So he begins to think these incidents are all connected. Now he truly believes the carjacker from the Walmart may also have stolen Matt's car and perhaps harmed Matt or taken him somewhere. Sometimes when these carjackings occur, the occupants are still in their vehicles. So armed with this new information, Blarick and another detective do exactly what Chris and his brother were doing the night before. They started canvassing the area where Matt's car had been found. They were hoping that Matt was still alive and being held somewhere against his will. But with 3 days having passed, the chances of Matt still being unharmed or alive were slim. That night, the Landrys are watching the news and they find out that the guy that they know as IHOP from the ATM video has been arrested in connection with the Walmart carjacking. So Doreen calls the Roseville Police Department and says, the man who robbed the bank and is in your jail is the same man who used my son's ATM card and my son is missing. You need to get someone in there to talk to him now. And again, Matt's family, they're the ones putting the heat on police and piecing all these things together. I can just not even begin to imagine what it must have felt like for Matt's family. It's like all the signs were pointing to this guy, and yet it must seem like nothing was happening. You probably feel very helpless. And Doreen was terrified because she saw that man holding a gun to Sarah in the bank and she knew how dangerous he was. And to think that this man somehow got a hold of her son's bank card. There were so many terrifying thoughts going through her mind, and she shared all of this with detectives. Meanwhile, Francesca and Gina, Matt's sister, are on the news, and they're pleading for someone to do something. They're also making a plea to the perpetrator saying, please just bring Matt back. And it's absolutely heartbreaking to watch. Gina even made a public post on Facebook telling local people to go down to the Roseville Police Department and put pressure on them to do something. And to her surprise, a bunch of people did just that. They even showed up at midnight to support the Landrys. And by the next day, Bob and Doreen, they went down there themselves to talk to detectives. What they didn't know was that the night before, after Blarick returned from searching those burned out houses, late through the night and into the early morning, and by 3:45 a.m., he and his partner were already interviewing IHOP. Blarick's partner did all the talking at first, asking questions, hoping that IHOP would confess to something in regard to Matt's case, but he was silent. Then Blarick used a trick. He took out a picture of Matt and he put it in front of IHOP and he said, we found him. Now he was lying, but Blarick wanted to analyze this man's reaction. and he saw him with a look of shock come over his face, as though he had just seen a ghost. But he still remained silent. But after some other questions, IHOP, who's really Ehab, so I guess I can call him by his real name now, he did begin to speak. But all he said was, "I got no answer for that." And he said it at least a half a dozen times. At one point during the interview, he actually compared himself to Jesus, saying that they were going to find out the truth at the end, that people didn't find out the truth about Jesus until the end, and that he would go to court to fight his case. But his coldness and his heartlessness were apparent. He didn't have to speak any words for the detectives to feel that just from his presence. So Blerick relayed all of this information to the Landrys, and they were happy. They were happy that officers seemed to finally be taking their son's case seriously. There was nothing they could do but go back home and wait. Meanwhile, Gina was trying to keep people informed about Matt's story through Facebook, and she gets a call from her best friend, and her friend says, "Gina, you better check your Facebook ASAP." There was a message that came in from a woman that Gina used to go to high school with, and she told her that her parents had called 911 on Sunday afternoon because they witnessed a carjacking, and it involved an older model green Honda. I swear, I was blown away by Matt's family being the ones that are piecing a lot of this evidence together. This happened in the city of East Point, which was just 4 minutes away from Roseville, which is where Matt was when he was last seen at Francesca's place and where the Quiznos was. But it was where the carjacking had occurred that made Gina's stomach turn. It happened behind the Quiznos, where Matt's debit card had been used last. This wasn't looking good. Gina immediately told Doreen, and they contacted Blerick with all of this new information, and sure enough, a 911 call from that afternoon was found. I have some of that call that I want to play for you.
911, East Point Police.
Back at Quiznos, I'm not sure, but it looks like a robbery. They got a guy cornered over here. Put him by the neck now. I think he's putting him in the trunk. They're beating him up now. Hurry!
Unbelievable. They were actually listening to the voice of Lawrence Wada, who was literally giving the dispatcher a play-by-play of what was happening right in front of his eyes. But by the time the police arrived that afternoon, the car was gone, and Matt was nowhere to be found. Here's what Detective Blerick was able to ascertain from the information provided by Lawrence. He was driving his GMC Suburban eastbound on 10 Mile Road with his wife and daughter, and as he approached the Quiznos, he saw someone that he described as a black male about 35 feet away standing around the back of the store and kind of tucking something under his waist belt. The traffic began to move forward, and Lawrence drove closer to Quiznos to get a better look. Lawrence then tells his wife, "I think that guy has a gun, lock the doors." Lawrence could see 2 other males standing by the guy that looked like he had a gun. Lawrence saw a dark-haired white male with his hand draped over another white male that was standing near the green Honda. The vehicle's trunk was open, and they were facing the trunk lid. Lawrence said that the black male stood about 10 to 15 feet away and continued to look up and down the streets. Lawrence turned into the parking lot of a store that was directly across from Quiznos, and he informed his wife that he was going to warn the Quiznos employees that there was a man behind their store with a gun, and he was probably going to rob the store. However, as Lawrence, which is very brave, by the way, I don't even know how these people get this courage, but as he gets out to do just that, the man with the gun looked around and then made direct eye contact with him. So Lawrence immediately headed right back to his car and moved it to another parking lot across from Quiznos still, and that's when he made the 911 call. That's when he told them there's a fellow with a gun who looks like he might be robbing Quiznos. At that point, there were still 3 guys on the scene. One was inside the driver's side of a green Honda with his legs out of the door and the door open. The dark-haired white male had his hand over the top of the driver's door and one hand on the top of the roof. He's sort of blocking the driver inside. Blerick was almost positive that that driver was Matt Landry and that the guy with the dark hair was IHOP. They weren't sure about the third male at this point, but Lawrence went on to explain the trunk was closed at this time. But as you heard on that call, The man believed to be IHOP walked around to that trunk and opened it, and he grabbed Matt by the neck. He put him in a headlock and attempted to drag him into that trunk. Matt was a really fit guy. I'm talking 6-pack abs or more. He obviously worked out. It wasn't just from his constant and impressive 200 beats per minute heavy metal music on the drums, but he looked like he worked out. IHOP was unable to get him into the trunk. So he punched Matt and then tried forcing him into the driver's seat. And at this point, Lawrence was on the phone with 911 saying they're beating someone up. He said that all 3 men were inside the car and then it sped off, with a man matching IHOP's description at the wheel. Lawrence didn't just stay there. He followed the green Honda for several streets and a few turns before he lost sight of it. And he kept relaying all of this information to the dispatcher as this played out. But I realized this is happening very fast, within just minutes. And that is why police did not find the car when they arrived. But after gathering this new information, detectives went over to Quiznos to interview the staff that were working on Sunday, August 9th, 2009. Michael Sawyer was an assistant manager that day, and he was working with his coworker, Jessica McKinney. They were both questioned about what they remember from that day in regard to Matt Landry, and right away, Jessica lets detectives know she knows Matt personally. She also took his order that day, but before Matt came in there was an encounter with 2 other men that stood out. Michael said before the men entered Quiznos, he saw them across the street in the plaza riding their bikes. A man he described as Arab American wearing an orange baseball cap, who we know is most likely IHOP at this point, came in and asked if he could have a cup of water, which Jessica ended up helping him get. After he got the drink, he left the store with it, and then shortly afterward, a young African American male walked into the store carrying the same cup and asked for some water. Jessica showed him where to fill up his cup. After this, Jessica said Matt came into the store and she began to take his order. He specifically mentioned that his girlfriend wasn't feeling well, and he asked if Jessica knew any kind of sub or food that would make her feel better or would be easy for her to keep down if she was feeling sick to her stomach. When I heard that part, it broke my heart. He cared so much. He was so proud to have a girlfriend, and I do the same thing. It's like you want to tell everyone that you meet that you love someone or that you're loved by someone, and I get it. And it hurts me to think about Matt doing this right before he's confronted by these 2 men. But Jessica proceeded to make 2 subs for Matt. He paid, and then he left. Jessica and Michael said that about 10 minutes later, the East Point police officers arrived at that store responding to a 911 call. After interviewing the workers at Quiznos, detectives made their way to the surrounding businesses asking to view their security footage, and they get a hit. A Marathon gas station near Quiznos says they have a camera, and they pull the surveillance footage, and detectives comb through it, and sure enough, at 5 p.m. on Sunday, August 9, 2009, they spot the green Honda pull in. Now, they already know that IHOP was seen at 3:30 that day at the Sunoco. So this footage was after the ATM transactions, and I'm so sick of calling him IHOP. I don't know why, so I'm going to call him Ehab because that's his name. Ehab was seen on this new surveillance pulling Matt's green Honda into this convenience store parking lot, this gas station parking lot. He gets out of the vehicle and enters the store. 2 females are inside the vehicle, but no Matt. Inside the store, Ehab and another guy appear to be conducting some kind of transaction. Ehab looks as though he has a pistol concealed in his waistband. 20 minutes earlier, their surveillance video shows an unidentified black male subject at the same gas station wearing the same orange baseball hat that Ehab was wearing when he was speaking to the unidentified individual. So all of this is starting to make sense, especially to Francesca once she gets the news. Matt had asked her if she wanted anything to eat before he left, and considering he got 2 subs, she knew that he had thoughtfully gotten her one, even though she declined his offer. Another thing is, she had a dream before Matt went missing, that he was taken and dragged into the basement of someone's house and tied up to one of those vintage heaters. And now she was beginning to wonder if that dream was actually a premonition. Matt's family is still hoping that he's alive. Maybe he's tied up somewhere. Maybe he's being kept against his will. Maybe he is at a crack house somewhere on 7 Mile Road. but they just hoped he was okay. 5 days had gone by, and finally a task force was put together to go search those exact locations. All the departments came together. Chesterfield, Roseville, the East Point Department, in addition to the Detroit Police Department's gang unit, and Dearborn, Michigan provided canines to this task force. They were on a mission to find Matt. Now, there are hundreds of these burned out houses in Detroit at this time. Many residents would beg the mayor to do something about this, to demolish them so they wouldn't attract vagrants and drug dealers and crime. It was Thursday, August 13th. Lieutenant Blarick and his partner, Lieutenant James Noblesdorf, entered an abandoned, burned-down home on Madeline Street near Monarch Street, just 1 block north of 7 Mile Road. This was 2 blocks away from the Raheem's family Sunoco gas station. This is the street they were on. It's a rough area. They had been confronted by drug dealers all day and users. They were trying to get information about Matt and whether anyone had seen him or knew a guy named IHOP. It was there on the street that Blarick had just found a shiny penny heads up outside the last house that he had just come out of. And he felt like his luck was about to change. He had made a promise to Matt's family as a father himself. He told them he would not stop until he found Matt. So him and his partner entered the house at 14711 Madeline Street. If you can even call this a house, because this structure, it didn't even have any walls that were completely standing up. The walls were just burned through. I mean, it was just like a ton of debris, and only like the metal frame was there. There was garbage just strewn around the lawn. It was set real back from the street, and it looked like it could come crashing down at any minute. Yet these men did not hesitate to venture inside. Look at this place. It's completely burned out. But it was what Detective Blarick saw when he stepped inside that made him keep going. Something out of place. A flip-flop in perfect condition. As he made his way deeper inside, that is when he saw what he feared. The body of a white male with the other flip-flops still on. It had only been 5 days, but with the smoldering summer heat, the condition of the body was much more decomposed than usual for such a short time frame. Lieutenant Blarick visually examined the remains and saw what appeared to be a gunshot wound to the head. They preliminarily identified Matt from photos that they had of him. They were certain it was him. He was transported to Wayne County Medical Examiner's office for a full autopsy, and using dental records, a medical examiner confirmed that they had found the body of Matt Landry. The most important thing they had to do right now was to inform the Landrys before the media arrived. Because when they radio something like this in, many news stations listen to their radio channels to be the first to cover a story. They sent the chief of police to Matt's family's home. And as soon as Doreen saw him at the door, she already knew the news that she was going to get. She didn't even want to hear it. But after she got the news and she finished crying, she said she went straight into the shower because she just wanted to feel like she was washing away this horrific reality. Dr. Lockman Sung, an assistant medical examiner in Wayne County, performed the autopsy on Matt. The manner of death was a homicide. The cause of death, gunshot wound to the back of the head in a slightly downward trajectory. Exit wound was to the front. Ehab Maslamani was only 17 years old when he was arrested and now charged with the murder of Matt Landry. He was from Libya. He was brought over to America at 10 years old and was living with relatives, but unfortunately he suffered from neglect. And he was put in the custody of the state. And after being tossed around to different foster homes, he finally ran away and he began living on the streets, ultimately getting involved with gangs, selling drugs, and using crack cocaine, among other illegal substances. He resorted to a life of crime to satisfy his addiction. It's a sad story, but an even sadder one for the man that he was accused of killing. Poor Matt Landry. Ehab pleaded not guilty to all of the crimes, the bank robbery, attempted murder, and the murder of Matt, among other things. Now the thing is, it was pretty obvious that Ehab had done this. He had been seen on the bank cameras, driving Matt's car in surveillance videos, at the ATM, so those crimes were more of a slam dunk. However, there was no evidence linking him to Matt's murder, no gun, no bullets at the scene. However, there were 2 spent cartridges found, one near Matt's body and the other a few houses down in a driveway. But without anything to compare them to, they couldn't concretely connect him to Matt's murder. They needed more. They also weren't convinced he acted alone, since the eyewitnesses from Quiznos, both Lawrence, who made the 911 call, as well as the staff, said there were 2 males with Matt. They needed to track down the other one. I know this is a lot of information. You guys always say you love the details, but I want you to know the details. I want you to know who was responsible for this. I owe that to Matt to tell the whole story. And according to Matt's friends, 2 people had to be involved. Although Matt was considered a gentle giant, he could take down anyone, and he would have easily beaten a single attacker, but 2, it would be a little bit more difficult. One of his bandmates was the one that said this. He was 6 feet tall and 280 pounds, and he said confidently that Matt could lay him out. Detectives started to canvass the area again, asking if anyone knew of a black male who hung out with IHOP, and sure enough, they got a name. Fat Daddy, aka Robert Taylor, a 16-year-old whose last known address was 15887 Madeline Street, the same street where Matt's body was found. They went there, but they couldn't find him. So on August 20th, they released a photo, here it is, to the media. By August 24th, he turned himself in, and the first thing he said, without even being prompted, was, "I did not kill that man," referring to Matt. When he was finally taken into custody for an interrogation, he waived his Miranda rights, and he told detectives his version of events, starting with the Quiznos situation. Robert said he was just a lookout. He also stated that Matt went with him and Ehab voluntarily, but we know that's not true. Plus, an orange hat was found in Matt's car, and when they analyzed it, it had Robert's DNA on it, linking him to being in Matt's car and an accomplice of Ehab's. According to Robert, he and Ehab were looking for a vehicle to steal that day. They rode their bikes to East Point from Detroit and did not want to ride them back because it would take too long. So that's why they wanted to steal a car. Wow. Robert Taylor described how he looked out while Ehab forced Matt into the vehicle. And then he showed Matt his gun as they drove away and threatened him. And that's all that Robert Taylor would say. He said he's not guilty and he stopped speaking. So now detectives go back to the streets interviewing people in the area where Matt's body was found, and they get a big break in the case from a man named Frederick Singleton. He was a crack addict who frequented the area of Madeline and Monarch, and he was able to fill in the gaps about what happened to Matt that Sunday evening. He knew both IHOP and Fat Daddy, Ehab and Robert Taylor. Fred said it was 10 p.m. and he was outside of a crack house in the area when he saw both of the men that he knows as IHOP and Fat Daddy. Fat Daddy was driving and IHOP was in the back with Matt. IHOP asked Fred if he had any drugs, and he said, "No, but I can get you some." And all 3 of them got out of the Honda and they went into the drug house. There were 2 women who were already inside doing drugs. At this point, IHOP gave Fred $100 and he left to go about a block away and get them some crack. He said he was only gone a few minutes. He brought back the drugs, and then IHOP, Fred, and the 2 ladies smoked crack while Robert and Matt sat on the couch. Fred looked over at Matt, who looked really out of place, and he asked him if he wanted some drugs, and that's when IHOP interrupted, saying, "Don't worry about him, he is with me." Then IHOP bought more crack, and Fred and the 2 ladies and him smoked yet again. Fred told detectives that he left the house around 11 p.m., and he saw 2 guys handing IHOP a gas can. This was all they had to go on since Robert was done talking and pleaded not guilty to the murder. The trial for both Ehab and Robert was set for September 2010. And meanwhile, remember Christopher Manning, Matt's dad's best friend? Well, months after Matt's death, on April 15, 2010, Chris, along with some friends, drove back to 14711 Madeline, where Matt's body had been found. They were looking to find a bullet or possibly the gun that killed him. Well, Chris ended up finding a bullet lodged in a wall. So he contacted detectives, and they came to retrieve this bullet. And yet again, it's Matt's loved ones who are diligently trying to step up to solve this case. The bullet was compared to the firearm found in the Walmart parking lot after that carjacking, but sadly, they were not a match. However, they were about to find out what happened. During the trial, Mike Sador testified for the prosecution. He was an inmate that was incarcerated with Robert Taylor in maximum security, and they came from the same neighborhood, so they connected. And eventually, Robert tells Mike the whole story. He said that him and Ehab were hitting licks, which means they were stealing, robbing, or tricking someone out of their vehicle. And he told him about beating up Matt and how they all got into the car at Quiznos. In the car, Robert said that Ehab showed Matt the gun, and they told Matt what time it was, which meant they were going to kill him. We already know what happens that evening and into the night because we have Fred's story about the crack house. But it's what happened afterward that Mike helped piece together. He said that Robert told him they ultimately took Matt to an abandoned house, and once they were inside, Ehab punched Matt in the face and then shot him in the back of the head, execution style. Then Robert sold the gun to someone on the streets. Neither Robert nor Ehab showed any remorse or shame during the trial. The two men were found guilty of murder in the first-degree kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, carjacking, and a slew of other charges. Matt's mom talked to the media outside the courthouse, and she said that she was relieved with the verdict. However, just 2 years later, the Supreme Court ruled in 2012 that sentencing minors to a life term without parole was unconstitutional. And as a result of the Supreme Court ruling, Robert and Ehab challenged their sentences, and Ehab's defense attorney used his painful childhood as a reason that they should overturn his sentence. It's sad, because they ended up having to do a resentencing hearing, and even more heinous details emerged, which Matt's family had to sit through yet again. Thankfully, neither men had been successful in any of their appeals. However, Ehab appealed again after the resentencing hearing, and it wasn't until 2016 that the court ruled against him, but sadly, that's also the year that Matt's father passed away at only 64 years old. I read that in 2021, just a year ago, Ehab tried once again to appeal his conviction, and thankfully, the courts denied him again. I like to end on something positive if possible, and Matt Landry's family and friends miss him every day. When his bandmates play together or hold an instrument, they feel his presence. One thing Doreen wanted more than anything was for the homes in that Detroit area to be demolished. She begged the mayor, saying that nothing good came from that place, and she pleaded with the mayor to do something about it. And in 2010, the mayor started a program to do just that, and the house that Matt was killed in was demolished. I wanted to end with this. Even though Matt was a gifted drummer, his mother, Doreen, told Dateline that he was also a talented acoustic guitarist. He would practice Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven for her in his spare time, and she said she would do anything to hear him strum his guitar chords again. She said that they planned to go to the Detroit Symphony before he was taken from her. Doreen and Bob wanted everyone at Matt's funeral to remember his smile and the joy that he brought to them. They wanted Matt to be celebrated for who he was. So the couple approached their priest with a very unusual request. During Matt's funeral, Doreen hoped a music group or someone would be willing to perform Stairway to Heaven in the church. The priest promised that he would see what he could do, and a choir of a number of talented singers sang the Led Zeppelin's classic in honor of Matt's memory. The song was a fitting choice for a rock star boy who scaled the symbolic staircase well before his time. I'm so sorry to Matt's family and loved ones. This can truly happen to anyone, and I'm so sorry it happened to him. Thank you all so very much for being here yet again. I will see you in my next video. Bye.